Good night. So I'm going to start with the job description of the Assistant Superintendent of Prison assigned to various stations. And this Assistant Superintendent works along with the Superintendent for any particular station. The first thing on that job description, where roles and responsibility is concerned, is that the ASP assists in developing, coordinating, executing, and reviewing programs, systems, and procedures relating to the rehabilitation, security, and safety of inmates at that assigned correctional institution. I want you to pay special attention to coordinating, developing, executing, reviewing the programs, systems, procedures relating to rehabilitation. Now, this curriculum this syllabus was developed in 2008, between May and June 2008. After that period, we had the program department coming into play. Now, program department has its own tiers of ranks. So, supervisor, ASP, superintendent, senior superintendent, straight to ACP. All right. That, however, does not absolve the ASP of these responsibilities of making recommendation to the type of programs in collaboration with the superintendent of the station for the type of programs for that particular station. The ASP and the superintendent, inclusive of the supervisors, the management team of any particular station, would be aware of the needs of the inmates on that station. As such, they could make recommendation. If there's a superintendent, the ASP, they recognize there's a big portion of their inmates who are sex offenders, and on that particular station there are no sex offender programs, then they are obligated to make recommendation to the programs department to secure, get facilitators or some program. They are obligated to make that type of recommendation. So they must know what type of inmates they have on the station and make a recommendation based on that to the programs department. We need that type of program on our to treat with our inmates. All right. If they are aware that there are a number of post-juvenile inmates, so they turn 18 and the court would have assigned them to your station, and the amount, it's more than a class. That ASP could make recommendation to the programs department, go through, do interviews, and find out, what the level of education these young men or young women might be at, and make recommendation based on that. I know we had the LSCMI, and that would identify the different 8 risk factors, and it would say which one was the highest. You're like forgetting the terms now, although I was very involved with the LSCMI, but it would identify the risk factors, and then you would know what you're addressing from a rehabilitative point of view, right? So it's very important for the ASP and the superintendent to be involved in the whole rehabilitative process, reviewing some of the programs, know what is going on, on the station, right? Secondly, the ASP supervisors staff engage in day-to-day operational activities relating to the supervision, security, and rehabilitation of inmates at any institution, and that involves inspecting parades of officers for duty, assigning duties and responsibilities, and monitoring work performed. Inspecting parades. Let me stick a pin in that one. People believe that a superintendent must come on a parade. The superintendent would go on the parade by choice. It's not that the superintendent is obligated based on the job description. However, sometimes a superintendent visits parade from time to time. This is not so with the ASP. The ASP is obligated, because it's one of their role and responsibilities, to inspect parades. And there's a whole process. So when I do the PO2 job description, I go from the PO2, the officer in charge calling to order the parade, and then handing over to the supervisor, and the supervisor would then, after an inspection, the supervisor would also report to the ASP when the ASP comes on the parade. And it's not that it's a parade, everyday thing, but when the ASP comes on the parade, the supervisor would report to the strength and everything, report to the ASP and hand over the parade to the ASP, who would do the needful, and then the ASP would hand back over the parade to the supervisor, who would continue to the end and dismiss the parade as they see it fit, assigning duties and responsibilities and monitoring work performed. From time to time, stations are given mandates. It could be something from the Commissioner of Prisons, the Deputy Commissioner, an ACP, to carry out specific responsibilities, and these are handed down. When they are handed down and the information is disseminated to the officers, whether it's via the supervisor on the parade, or directive from the superintendent to the supervisor, however it is done, the ASP has to monitor that those responsibilities and that work is being performed in accordance with the instructions. That has to continue. The ASP also appraises the performance of staff, and if it's ASP, will appraise the performance of the staff under them, that they're immediate, the ones that they supervise immediately. It's the supervisor. So the ASP appraises performance of supervisors and has to ensure that the supervisors are functioning how they're supposed to function based on their job description, based on instructions, general orders, station orders, and ensure that all of the directives of the Commissioner of Prisons are being followed, done in accordance with the rules and regulations of the prison service, right? The ASP also counsels and provide relevant advice and guidance, and that is across the board to anyone who would need it. An officer could have some issue that they would need the ASP to give some guidance on. It could be work related, it could be personal. The ASP has to know who they could refer that officer to. The ASP has to be aware. Sometimes as an ASP you have to make a recommendation to we have counselors, we have EAP, we have psychologists, and sometimes the ASP has to make a phone call and set an appointment for the officer to go to one of the psychologist who would refer the officer to an external provider, a EAP provider that the prison service would go to, right? The ASP also has to must identify training needs, providing on-the-job training, and recommend training for staff. Yes, based on the deficiencies, the issues that the ASP, while they are making their tours of duty, notice I didn't say wrongs. There is nowhere you would see in a job description for the ASP where it say make wrongs. We don't make wrongs. What we do is make tour of duty. So you're going to make tour of duty. When the ASP is making tour of duty, there's a reason for it. All right? So once the ASP identifies, listen, my officers are in need of XYZ training. There's a use of force issue. I identify, okay, use of force training. You're having issues with your gatekeeper and the management thereof. You identify a developmental training. That's the function of the ASP. You also have the ASP initiating disciplinary action against staff supervised, initiating. So the ASP, if the ASP identifies that officers are breaching rules and regulations, the ASP has to send through a report to the superintendent recommending that, and based on what the report is and the evidence, and it would have been based on maybe the ASP would have addressed it before. Documentation must be there, right? The ASP could then recommend to the superintendent, based on XYZ, please see attached PQRST as evidence of, I recommend that disciplinary action be taken against whoever. And that's the another function. The SP could grant time off to the supervisor if an officer asks for certain time off and the supervisor, and the officer is desperate, there's a problem, and the supervisor refuses for whatever reason, the officer could go to the ASP and appeal to the ASP to intervene. All right? Only that way. The officer cannot pass the supervisor straight and go to the ASP. That's not supposed to happen. Okay? The ASP also must ensure that the rules and regulations and general orders and station orders are adhered to. It is an indictment on any ASP on any station of any station when rules and regulations are breached and nothing happens. That is an indictment on the ASP, because the ASP's job is to point it out to the supervisor, instruct the supervisor to take action, and also to initiate disciplinary action against. All right? So you all see how these things are supposed to happen. The ASP also conducts, I am using two computers right now. The ASP also conducts daily inspection, daily inspection of assigned stations to ensure that procedures for securing, supervising, and rehabilitating inmates are being followed, and that acceptable levels of sanitation are maintained. This is not making wrongs. This is conducting daily inspection of assigned stations. So they do that by visiting inmates in the infirmary, condemn and disassociation units. Disassociation units, we just call that several. State hospitals and courts. So it means that Yes, we know we talk about making rounds, night rounds, the ASP making night rounds. However, the ASP has to do internal inspection. Don't wait for somebody else come in on your station to do that. That is your responsibility. You're visiting the cell block. When I go on some stations and some cell block, and inmates telling me, Miss, you know how long me and see nobody in green? Serious? Well, I don't think that happened now. As I said, I've been out of the system for 3 years. So let's say that don't happen again, okay? Checking on the progress of gangs of inmates working under the supervision of officers. So you have out on the estate, yes, the ASP, take a visit. Go outside and see. Golden Grove, jump in the vehicle and drive around. Sometimes go and check the fence for yourself, because it have some officers walking around doing perimeter check. I have stood up. I was living on the compound. I have stood up and watched officers doing perimeter check and call the supervisor and say, that person who doing supervisor check and checking nothing. Right? Because they're walking around and and then they're dragging the thing and they're watching. I was amazed that some of the officers who did such good work, and I have at times spoken to those officers and say, I've noticed you doing such a good job of checking there are officers, I told that. But then there are some I had to call the supervisor and say, don't send them again. Reviewing requests of inmates and taking appropriate action. Does this happen? Inmates requests, does it still happen? I was told by somebody that a superintendent had complained that there were too much requests. I don't know about that. Because it's one of the things that would keep the inmates calm. It's one of the things I used. I would go, sit in maximum security prison, sit by the gate with a clerk, and one inmate will run around and say, who want to see mother? And I would take right there to the requests. We would go back in the office, and the amount of requests kept going down, 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 because they were seeing me, their requests, I was giving a feedback, and so that was one of the things I used to keep that aggressive behavior down. All right? And so sometimes inmates have requests. I know the stations are bigger, things change, so I am just giving you what the document said. Please write what is written and not what happens, please. The ASP also checks arms, ammunition, keys, and other selected items to ensure that they are secured properly, and reviews weekly returns of arm and ammunition prepared by staff supervised. There's a document on the management of keys. You will find that in the file section, and that I can't remember it now. I could have quoted it a while ago. And that was after the key in Port of Spain went lost, and now we have a key check system. I don't think it is happening, but that is the documentation for that. Reviews and makes entries in station diary relating to occurrences significant to the state of security at an assigned station. So when the ASP is on tour of duty, the ASP, based on what the ASP see, the ASP would make an entry in the station diary, wherever the ASP would have seen whatever is going on. The ASP would make an entry in the diary there. All right. Continued checks and certifies ledgers, registers, and other records prepared by staff supervised, and to ensure that they are maintained properly. All of those things is a continuation of the station diary returns, stuff like that, right? Investigates alleged breaches of prison rules and regulations by staff supervised and inmates within an assigned correctional institution, and prefers disciplinary charges as necessary. Investigates other alleged breaches of misconduct as detected. All right, so you'll understand that's where the whole investigative process is. The ASP also writes and reviews. I want you to pay attention to that. Writes and reviews reports. So while the ASP writing the reports, every report that comes from the supervisor, the report, and I would deal with the PO2 supervisor, and that report that's supposed to be then sent to the ASP. Before that report leaves the ASP to go to the superintendent, there must be a recommendation from the ASP to the superintendent. The superintendent, the ASP does that recommendation based on when they review the report that came from the supervisor. The ASP has to ensure that the documentation from the supervisor is completed. All the attachments, everything that was spoken to, everybody would have submitted their report based on what is written. And after the ASP goes through that entire report, the ASP does not append their signature and send it to the superintendent without their cover with their review and recommendation. Understand the difference, all right? And the ASP also ensures that goal delivery report is prepared and presented to a judge in the High Court as required. That's a whole, that goal delivery, I have to pull up that and send, because there's a whole process for that I have documented that I need to, I think I have it on main gate since I originally did it. So I would have to check on that, all right? The ASP conducts inspections of correctional institutions at night. Now that is the night tour of duty as rostered to examine the state of prison security and to ensure that established measures for the securing of inmates are being observed. So when the ASP goes to the hospital, the ASP has to ensure that the officers who are supervising how they're supposed to be supervising. Not on one floor. I went to visit an inmate in Mount Hope, and I was directed to a floor, but when I walked down and walked back, there was no officer, so I left and I went back, and as I went, I saw an officer. Mind you, was a batch of mine. And I say, "Hey, what you doing here now?" I thinking that officer is visiting somebody, okay? Only to hear him say, "I feel like looking for me, you know." So I watch him. I say, "Where's the inmate?" The inmate on the floor, the next floor down below. And he upstairs lying outside the elevator, lean up, talking to somebody. And I ask him, I say, "Are you mad?" So I ask him, "Where's your diary?" He didn't even have his diary. He tell me his diary finished long time. Now this is a person who had the same amount of service like me. We are talking about rank now. Right? And so you could imagine how upset I was. And then he's telling me, "Oh, that inmate I ran into going away. He barely alive," and things like that. That has nothing to do with anything. That has nothing to do with anything. What about if somebody had a grudge against the inmate, see the inmate there, and come and cut off the inmate air supply? How was he going to, you know it's a lie, right? One long lie you would say. Oh, he just went to the toilet and, and so ASPs, when we are doing night visits, we pay attention and you write what you see in the officer's diary, and then based on anything that is out of regulation, things like that, then you put it in a report and you submit it. All right? The ASP represents the prison service and committees and boards and at meetings, conferences, seminars, and social events as required. All right, so you have to ensure that as an ASP, you could speak on behalf of the commissioner, or it means you have to have information factual that you could present at any time. The ASP responds to emergency situation, assumes control, responds to emergency situation, assumes control or assumes command in the absence of a senior officer, and takes appropriate action to establish inmate control. Now, when there is a senior officer, what the ASP would do, the ASP would hand over. However, when I do with supervisors, supervisors are incident commanders. A supervisor don't ever leave a station. A supervisor just hand over. So the supervision of a station, supervisors are what you call operational managers. They are managers. They manage the station. The SP go home, the superintendent go home, senior superintendent. Supervisor is always there. All right? So I want us to pay attention to these things. So I am saying it this way so that when, depending on how a question is posed, this would stick in your head, right? The ASP also performs other duties related to job function, which may be assigned from time to time. And you know how people like to say, that is not my job. I know my job. I know my job. Once it is assigned, it becomes your job. Assigned from time to time. If you get instructions to do something that is not spelled out from 1 to 12, 13 is what that is. All right? So that is I've just gone through the roles and responsibilities of the ASP. All right? One of the other things I wanted to tell you is everything regarding the roles and responsibilities would be done in accordance with something that is documented, would be done in accordance with something that is written, would be done in accordance with investigations are done within a stated time frame. When you get investigation, there is a time frame. Records are maintained in accordance with. You give guidance which is in keeping with established policy and procedures. Everything is either established in accordance with stated time frame, certain policies and procedures. Always ensure that you know the policies and the procedures and what anything is done in accordance with. And those are some of the guidelines, the files that I would have put in on files in MainGate. I have sought to give you all of the guidance that you need, that you could refer to, the procedures, the policies, and the guidelines. And this brings us to the end of the job description of the Assistant Superintendent of Prisons.